Jane?
Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about Thor: Love and Thunder. This is the 111th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It is?
No, but it kind of feels like it with all the Disney Plus shows to keep track of. So there's bound to be a lot of plot holes and questions that viewers have that may not seem to line up with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Luckily, I am here with answers for you. We scoured our community page and my Twitter for your unanswered questions, but please feel free to shout out more down in the comments. And we're going to talk a lot about that ending scene and why Thor didn't wish for Jane to be healed and all the other wish stuff. Got a lot to say later in the video. Soral Trading asks, why is no one talking about the dead Celestials at the sea in the recent MCU movies? Well, for one thing, maybe they are talking about it and it's just happening off screen. And for another, think about how much weird stuff is happening right now just in our world that we don't always talk about in casual conversation. 2 years ago, the Angels played a baseball game under an orange sky in front of cardboard people, and we don't talk about it. Now imagine what it must be like living in the MCU, where the extraordinary has become ordinary. Plus, the news at the end of the Eternals made it pretty clear the general public had no idea this thing was a Celestial. They just thought it was a lot of marble that came out of the ground. Toby on Twitter has another question. If Heimdall is in Valhalla, how come we didn't see him dust away like Odin or Jane? Good question, and the same question also applies to Loki, Frigga, these Asgardian soldiers, the Valkyries, that guy, and that guy, plus all these dead people. You know, it's funny, these are also like the fan questions we got in The Phantom Menace when people were wondering why Qui-Gon didn't fade away, and I think the answer is similar. It wasn't in the screenplay, but also it was a specific power given to some characters. So remember, Odin did not die in battle. As this movie states, you have to die in battle to get to Valhalla, and yet he transformed into Valhalla dust like Jane, so presumably he is also in Valhalla with her. So I think this is because Odin was always going to go to Valhalla no matter what. Maybe because he was king or because he had the Odin Force.
What's the Odin Force?
It's this powerful magic that Odin has. It's why he had to take a nap to recharge in Thor 1.
Oh, so that's why he got sleepy.
Exactly. So Odin was always going to go to Valhalla. Odin enchanted the hammer to attach it to Thor.
If he be worthy, he shall possess the power of Thor.
I think this also guaranteed Thor a place in Valhalla because Odin said that he was worthy. And Thor passes the same worthy enchantment on to Jane. Because Jane dies defending Asgard, she is allowed to transcend her mortal form and enter Valhalla. You know, there's one good thing that all the gods in this movie have in common.
They're powerful and they live forever.
Well, besides that, all the gods have lustrous, thick heads of hair. I'm guessing that's why Gore the God Butcher is so bitter. Someone really should have told him that the best way to prevent hair loss is to start when you still had hair left. And that is why I use Keeps. They're the sponsor of this video. There is a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I did not waste any time. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so you have to act fast. And you need to start early and stick with it. So if your hair is starting to thin, I wouldn't put this off. Start using Keeps now. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. It's even proven to work on a watcher's scalp. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of their competitors, and that is why hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, don't ignore it or hope the problem goes away. Do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. Now back to Thor. Tank Engine asks, I don't know if that counts as a plot hole, but it's just something I asked myself during the movie. Why did Stormbreaker have its own personality and Mjolnir didn't? Well, it could be because Stormbreaker was created from a living being, Groot's arm. And we've already seen that a piece of a Groot can come alive as a new Groot. So maybe the wood still has some sentience. I think it's more because the hammer is a conduit for Thor's emotions, and that he's not capable of expressing these emotions himself. So it acts as a conduit. Just like how it's a conduit for his power, it's a conduit for his emotions. Also, Mjolnir definitely has a personality. It chose to be with Jane and won't return to Thor. I Can Barely Swim asks, also, does Stormbreaker not have a worthiness requirement because it seems like everyone and their mom was able to hold it in this movie? Although I guess Odin officially enchanted Mjolnir for worthiness, but Stormbreaker was just forged, and now anybody can summon a Bifrost. Answering your own question, thanks for that. Well, one, yeah, Stormbreaker never had a worthiness enchantment. Mjolnir didn't either until Odin gave it one in Thor 1. In fact, we even see Thanos use Stormbreaker in Endgame. 2, Odin's worthiness spell of Mjolnir was broken when he died. That's why Hela could hold it. And Cap still had to be worthy because that hammer was from the year 2013 when it was still enchanted by Odin. And as for the Bifrost, any being who is powerful enough to use Stormbreaker can summon the Bifrost.
A king's weapon, meant to be the greatest in Asgard. In theory, it could even summon the Bifrost.
In this movie, we see Thor, Axel, and Gore use the Bifrost, and they're all very powerful beings. Grant Hudson asks, how come Gore can kill the other gods but not Thor? Is Thor not a god? Because Thor is a badass and very hard to kill. At Salts Pepper says, how does Korg have two dads and a mom's boyfriend that he hates? How do Cronin family units work?
Well, I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone turned up, except for my mum and her boyfriend, who I hate.
Well, we have no idea. Maybe Cronin males create male children, which are then raised by the females. Korg would have hated his mom's boyfriend because he is a poor replacement for his two dads. And I think it's pretty important that we respect Cronin culture and not make them conform to the preconceived gender norms of Western society.
You Earthers have hang-ups.
At Darther White has a great question. Why can Thor now give his powers to others? If he could before, why didn't he do that in Infinity War, for example? Love this question. For one thing, he does not transfer his own power. He transfers the power from Zeus's thunderbolt. That's why it's yellow energy that crackles outward. And he even says that it's for a limited time. However, I think Thor could learn to do this because, well, for one thing, his dad was able to do it, and Thor is half witch.
I was raised by witches, boy.
If we ever see King Thor from the comics, then maybe he'll have mastered this power and he'll be able to grant his powers to his heirs. It's also very likely that Odin granted these powers to Thor at a young age. In the comics, Mjolnir was inhabited by a living storm called the God Tempest. Maybe Odin bonded a similar being to his son. After all, not every Asgardian has a superpower like Thor does. In fact, I think it's just Heimdall. Well, and Volstag's power to apparently be immune to cholesterol.
Volstagg, the delicacy so succulent you thought you died and gone to Valhalla.
ScreenCrush's Matt Singer asks, if these gods are so easily killed, as in the scene in Omnipotent City where Thor and his allies are like slicing up people and blood's going everywhere, then why do you even need a necrosword to kill a god? Well, Zeus made a point to say that Gore killed some low-level gods. So let's presume that the gods work on the American gods rule, that the more worshippers they have, the more powerful they become. So it also explains Zeus's monologue at the end about how people don't praise the gods anymore, they praise superheroes. So these guys that Thor and his team are slicing through would have been very easy to kill, at least for them, because they're powerful gods. But Gore needed the necrosword because he was a mere mortal who had no other way to fight the gods. Matt also asked, the first Thor made it clear that the Asgardians are not gods. They are aliens who early man mistook for gods.
We are not gods. We're born, we live, we die, just as humans do.
But now, they're gods. Everyone just refers to everyone as gods. I guess when you have a villain called the God Killer, you have to do that, but it's sort of strange. Yeah, and you know what? We've run into a similar problem in the comics, where, like decades ago, it was revealed that Asgardians are shape-shifting aliens who took on the form of gods that the Norsemen worshipped. But in more recent years, Jason Aaron's arc portrayed them as actual gods who answer prayers. I think it all comes down to belief. If people believe these aliens are gods, then this belief endows them with extra power. Or at the very least, it's this belief that Gore hates. Gore wants to remove the idea of gods from existence. He's the ultimate humanist. Ultramate asks, minor plot hole, we learned that the 9 realms can be explained with science and can be traveled by space transport. So why do the people in Valhalla never try to return back to help Thor? Now, I don't think this is a plot hole, it's just something that isn't explained. We don't know what Valhalla is. Is it another realm? Another dimension? Is it inside a snow globe and the MCU is just in a kid's imagination? Or is it a server that Asgardians upload their consciousness into? Are the Asgardians all hosts?
Getting off topic.
You're right. Look, usually when characters reach the afterlife in a story, they become enlightened. They see that the fights of this world are petty and that the bloodshed here is inconsequential because there is more to life than just the mortal form. So that's a reason they wouldn't help. Also, maybe if they return and help out, then they can't return.
Like He-Man or Moonlight Graham.
You can't go back, can you?
It's all right.
I'm sorry.
If you go with them, there is no coming back. This is your great reward.
Exactly. Nicholas Leonardi asks, Odin didn't die in battle, therefore he didn't go to Valhalla. Well, as we saw in Ragnarok, Odin gets to write the rules, and he gets to write the history. My guess is that the Odin Force that he carries gives him an automatic go to Valhalla card.
What's the Odin Force?
Well, it's this all-powerful cosmic force that Odin carries with him. It's why he had to enter the Odin Sleep in Thor 1.
Oh, I thought that was just because everything Odin did had Odin at the start of it. The Odin breakfast. The Odin poops.
Yeah, right. Okay, and also we do see Odin turn into Valhalla dust and Jane turns into Valhalla dust. Therefore, I think we can reasonably assume that Odin does go to Valhalla. Raiden Darkholm has an easy question. Thor actually got Mjolnir back in Endgame when he and Rocket went back in time. But in this movie, only the original broken one exists. So what happened to the replacement? Did it get dusted with Thanos? Hi Raven, Captain America returns the hammer at the end of the movie. You can see it with him in the time portal. Quentin Anthony Anderson asks, this one might seem minor, but really stuck out to me just based on all the press prior. Taika Waititi and James Gunn have said on numerous occasions that the goats would end the movie with the Guardians of the Galaxy and they'd be saddled with them at least during the holiday special, but that clearly didn't happen. I'm wondering if that was an oversight by the editing team or the final cut, or was it just a joke or prank that Waititi was making before the movie came out, making Gunn think that he had to adjust his script to accommodate the goats.
Seriously, why the goat obsession?
No reason.
You know, I hadn't heard any of this. And you never know, the goats might be with the Guardians in the special, and they'll just explain it away with a line. Thor sent us those darn goats again. Also, this wouldn't have been an oversight by the editing team. Everything in a movie of this size is very deliberate, especially since the goats were VFX. Tantho Hun asks, I'm still wondering about Gor's daughter after she was resurrected. Was she Eternity, or a part of Eternity, or an entirely new cosmic entity? This is a great question, and I'm looking forward to the MCU giving us an explanation. Now, we talked about this at length in our Ending Explained video and in our Thor 5 speculation video. It's pretty exciting because this is a totally new character, but she could also be the MCU's version of Captain Universe. Basically, this is a champion of Eternity that possesses a cosmic force, and this force can also go from Guardian to Guardian. For instance, at one point, Spider-Man was even the champion of Eternity for a while in the comics. Eben Tedis asks, how did Thor travel again to the Shadow Realm using Zeus's lightning bolt? That's kind of like saying, how did Ryan travel to the store using a car? The lightning bolt is able to transport people, probably just one person at a time, like Valkyrie's horse. This is why they did not instantly use the lightning bolt to transport everyone. Instead, they had to use Stormbreaker and the ship. Also, Thor used the lightning bolt to transport to the center of the universe, not to the Shadow Realm. Nerd. Lucky Cow asks, why didn't Thor just summon Stormbreaker back after Gorr took it? How did Jane get to Eternity so fast? And how does the Thunderbolt also have the ability to traverse the universe so quickly? Well, Zeus's lightning bolt just has that ability. It's just one of the things that it can do. It's magic. Jane got to Eternity using Valkyrie's horse. Thor even has a line where he says to Valkyrie, your horse is Bifrost, can't take all of us at once.
Excuse me, it's a Pegasus.
Yeah, that's what I said. And as for why Thor didn't summon Stormbreaker after Gorr took it, I mean, that's a good question. In the Dark World, we see Thor summoning his hammer when it's on other planets. So maybe this is because that was a specific hammer that was enchanted to him. Maybe he has a stronger bond with Mjolnir than he does with Stormbreaker, so he's able to summon it light years away. But really, I think it's because the power of the Necro Sword allowed Gorr to take control of the axe. The sword has been around since the dawn of time. Its magic would supersede Stormbreaker's and Thor's. J. Cash Tree says being worthy / using Mjolnir comes with a Thor outfit for Jane. Same happens to other characters in the comics, but this didn't happen to Cap when he used the hammer in Endgame. Yes, that's true. It seems to me that the hammers manifest whatever clothes or armor that is an outward expression of how the characters feel. When Thor becomes worthy again in the movie Thor, his old armor returns to him after Odin stripped it away. In this movie, he has several outfit changes based on his mood, like when he dons the shiny armor to impress Mjolnir. Jane wanted to completely change herself physically, from a cancer-ridden mortal into a mighty Thor. She wanted to be someone else, hence why she also made a mask for herself. But Steve Rogers did not need to change his outward appearance. He was already comfortable in his own suit. I mean, if that makes sense.
That is America's ass.
Plus, he was a first-time hammer user, and I don't think he'd ever seen Thor use this ability of the hammer, except for like right when the battle started. He probably didn't even know that it could change his clothes for him. Also, I don't need to see Captain America in a cape.
No capes!
Sam Rat Creations asks, why did Gorr go to Asgard? Which god was he aiming for? Valkyrie's not a god, and Thor was not present on Earth. So there's a whole question about what makes somebody a god, and in the end, it's that they are worshipped by people. There are other Asgardian gods who aren't Thor, but the reason Gorr was in Asgard was to draw Thor out so he could steal Stormbreaker and use the Bifrost to get to Eternity at the center of the universe. Now, along those same lines, Sabrina Massa Stein says, how is Stormbreaker the key to Eternity when Thor only decided to make it a handful of years ago? Was it impossible to access Eternity until it was created? That's a good question. It's not Stormbreaker that's the key, it's the Bifrost that Stormbreaker creates. The Bifrost was also generated in old Asgard. It's a giant teleportation machine. I've theorized in the past that the Asgardians built it using the Tesseract before Odin placed the stone on Earth for safekeeping. If that's the case, then it's not just the Bifrost, it's the Space Stone that's the key to accessing Eternity. Eternity is at the center of the universe, where the stones came from during the Big Bang. So you have to return that stone's energy to the place where it was created to get your wish.
Like the One Ring or the castles in Adventure.
Exactly. ESK asks, why are both of Thor's eyes blue? They were different in Endgame. Yes, they were different. But remember, Thor got his robot eye in space in Infinity War, and then he stayed on Earth in Endgame because he took time off to be depressed. But now he's had several months in space to get himself a new eye or to have his eyes changed to the same color. In the 5 years after Infinity War, he would have been too depressed to care that his eyes were different colors. CPT.SAH asks, why didn't Thor take Mjolnir with him to fight Gorr? because he left Mjolnir behind to protect Jane. And we had a lot of questions about Jane, like if being a Thor makes Jane strong and turning back into Jane makes her weak, can't she just be Thor forever? Well, no, because being Thor is weakening her mortal form. Somehow. The hammer still needs a body to host it, so if she kept using it, she would eventually become a lifeless, hulking husk of a former human being, and people everywhere would cry out, "Dear God, what is that monstrosity?" Lil Gaggle asks, so since Jane died like Odin, does that make her Asgardian, or is it just for worthy people? Well, first of all, it could be anybody who dies in battle gets to enter Valhalla, so I don't know, in theory, the Vision could be there, Pietro could be there, any other MCU characters who have actually stayed dead could be there. But also, maybe Jane did so much in the service of Asgard, and she also wielded the hammer, that there was an exception made and she was allowed into Valhalla. Also, she was almost an Asgardian by marriage.
Then does that mean that Steve Rogers can enter Valhalla as well?
Bro, I think Steve Rogers can enter any afterlife in the MCU that he wants to go to. Frequent user 99 asks, when did Thor and Jane break up? Obviously, they were dating after the Dark World, and they're implied to still be together during the party scene in Age of Ultron. At the end of the movie, Thor seemingly leaves to find Infinity Stones after the Battle of Sokovia, so when would he have had the time to read Jane's note? Well, first of all, it's possible they broke up before Age of Ultron and Thor was just lying to his friends because he couldn't face the pain.
There's even talk of Jane getting a Nobel Prize.
But actually, the breakup that's implied lines up perfectly with the montage in the movie. We see Jane getting absorbed in her work and Thor leaving for space more and more often to find the stones. So they probably broke up after Age of Ultron, while Thor was still hunting for the stones right before Ragnarok. J.A. Varillo asks, how did Jane travel to the center of the universe? She did it on Valkyrie's flying horse.
Pegasus.
Pegasus, that's what I said. J. Ma had a couple of questions. Jane didn't die on the battlefield, but got to Valhalla. Yeah, she did die on the battlefield. Sif was going to survive her battle injuries, but Jane didn't. She took the Necro Sword into her hammer and into herself. That finally did her in. It's actually a metaphor for her cancer. And their other question, the book about Vikings and myths said Mjolnir brings good health, and then the movie says it's killing Jane. Well, I don't think Mjolnir knew that it was going to suck the mortal life away from her and inhibit her ability to fight a mortal disease that the hammer had never heard of. And you can't deny that Mjolnir did give her good health, at least in short little bursts. And here's a big one that we got a lot of. RDS MPR39 asks, the fact that they can't cure cancer with space magic. All I can say is Asgardians don't know anything about treating human diseases. For them, human life is fleeting. They live for thousands of years. And for most mortals, they just wouldn't care if they got cancer. And here's another one, or that Gore was killing gods throughout the universe and Captain Marvel knew/did nothing about it. Gore literally just started killing gods at the start of the movie, and the universe is infinite. How do you know that Captain Marvel knew about Gore, or that she wasn't out there trying to help? Or that Darcy was never questioned or talked about Westview and the effects that the barrier had on her, if any? Did you want them to stop the movie so a character could recap a TV show that we've all watched? And can Thor only use Heimdall's vision power with him or Axel? Because if not, why didn't Thor see what's going on in the universe rather than using the Guardians of the Galaxy's distress signals? Because it's Axel's power, not Thor's. Thor even says in the movie that he will teach Axel how to use the power. And there were lots of questions about wishes. Daredevil asks, it was told that whoever reaches eternity can fulfill their wishes. So as Thor also was in front of eternity, why didn't he ask for Jane back? The movie very specifically says that the first person to reach eternity gets their wish granted. Gore got there first. Here's another one. Why did Gore die in the end? Just because he asked Eternity to bring back his daughter, why did he die? It was never mentioned a soul for a soul or something like that. He died because the Necro Sword had infected him. It's called the Necro Sword after all, literally the Death Sword. Another common question was, how does Thor get to the Gateway of Eternity without Stormbreaker? He uses the Thunderbolt, it can do that? Well, yeah, he travels to the center of the universe with the Thunderbolt. The Gateway of Eternity can only be opened with the Bifrost. After Gore opened it, Thor was able to walk in. Wireless Donuts asks, if Thor always knew about a god at the center of the universe that can grant any wish, why didn't he do anything in the 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame to try to go to the center of the universe and wish all the blip people back into existence? Well, I'm pretty sure that they say in the movie that they always thought this Eternity Gateway was a myth. Also, even if he knew about it, no one knew how to enter the gateway. Gore only knew because the Necro Sword told him. And we got that question a lot too. How did Gore know about the Gateway of Eternity? When the sword calls out to him, it shows him flashes of the gateway and whispers, "Gateway, Eternity, Bifrost." Josh Blank says, why did Thanos not go to Eternity and just wish for half the universe to disappear? Seems like it would have saved him a lot of time and trouble. Well, Josh, it's for the same reason that I didn't buy Amazon stock when Jeff Bezos was selling books out of his garage. I didn't know any better. It's likely that Thanos had no idea about the Eternity Gateway or the Wish, or maybe he heard about it and he didn't believe the story. But even more likely, Thanos would have thought that the stones were the only way to accomplish his goal. If he said to Eternity, "I wish no one would starve," or "I wish half the universe was erased," then Eternity had the room to misinterpret this wish in a variety of ways. But Thanos is a control freak, and the only person he would ever trust with godhood, trust with a responsibility this huge, is himself. That's why he would have insisted on using the stones instead of Eternity's wish. And a very common question was, why doesn't Bale make a wish to be with his daughter? You know, like wording it, "I wish to be with my daughter forever." Well, this is because you literally get one wish, and apparently it has to be very specific. Saying, "I want to be with my daughter," could just mean that he would die right away. And finally, Matt Singer asks, why does everyone on New Asgard except Thor dress like they're ordinary human movie extras and not Asgardians? Well, Thor's been out in space, and these people have been living on Earth. In Endgame, Thor dresses like a human, even when he goes on a mission, until the very last scene when he gets his mojo back. But if you have any more questions or plot holes, please let me know down in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, be sure to subscribe, smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.